"You can come if you want, but it would be better if you didn't," my mom said about the trip. I simply nodded and chose not to go. I also stopped sending the $2,100 monthly transfer I had been covering for my brother. 3 weeks later, they showed up at my door, furious. So, last Tuesday, my brother called me in tears. Not quiet or sad tears, these were frustrated, angry ones, the kind where his voice shook and he struggled to speak clearly. He said, "Jolene, what did you do?" And honestly, I smiled. I actually smiled because for the first time in 27 years, someone in my family experienced what it feels like to be caught off guard. But let me go back, because you need the full context to understand my decision. By the end of this, you might see me as either completely justified or entirely wrong, possibly both. My name is Jolene. I'm 31, living in Columbus, Ohio, and working as a senior analyst at a logistics company. I'm not wealthy, but I earn a comfortable income. I worked through college, earned my degree, and gradually advanced in my career. And here's the key detail. About 4 years ago, my family began treating me like a financial backup plan. It started small. My mom, Patrice, would call with minor concerns like a higher electric bill. Then my dad, John, would casually mention needing new tires for his truck. And then there's my younger brother, Colton, charming, likable, but not particularly responsible. He moved to Austin chasing a startup idea that never materialized and suddenly couldn't pay rent. Naturally, everyone turned to me. To be clear, I care about my family, but caring for someone and financially supporting them indefinitely are not the same thing. You would agree with that distinction. Here's how things escalated. About 2 years ago, Colton called me in a panic. His roommate had left, his startup was pivoting, essentially failing, and he was close to eviction. He was genuinely distressed. Then my mom called separately and said, "He's your brother. You can't let him end up without a home." So I stepped in. I began paying his rent, $2,100 every month. That's not a small amount. It's comparable to a second mortgage. I agreed because I believed it would be temporary. Colton promised repayment within 6 months. That was 2 years ago, and I haven't received anything back. What bothered me most wasn't just the money. It was the absence of acknowledgement. No one ever said thank you. Not my brother, not my parents. It became an expectation, as if my financial stability obligated me to provide. Still, I continued paying because I was the responsible one, and when you're in that role, you often keep giving without questioning it. Every year, my family organizes a large trip. Last year was Myrtle Beach. The year before, Gatlinburg. This year, they planned a week in Destin, Florida. A beach house, full family gathering, everyone included. I was genuinely looking forward to it after months of nonstop work. The idea of relaxing by the ocean felt well-earned. So I called my mom to discuss details, travel plans, packing, typical logistics. There was a pause, the kind where someone is choosing their words carefully. Then she said, "Jolene, you can come if you want, but it would be better if you didn't." I was confused and asked what she meant. She explained that Colton had been under stress and needed the trip to relax. She added that there had been some tension between us and it would be best to avoid any conflict. To be clear, there was no ongoing conflict. The only issue was that a month earlier, I had asked Colton when he planned to start contributing to his own rent again. Apparently, that conversation made him uncomfortable, so asking a basic question about responsibility was considered drama? I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "Okay." She sounded relieved, as if she expected resistance. She said, "I knew you'd understand. You're always so mature." That's often how it's framed when one person consistently accepts less without complaint. After the call, I sat quietly for a long time. I wasn't emotional yet, just processing. It was one of those moments where everything becomes clear. I realized I was paying $2,100 a month to support my brother's lifestyle while being excluded from a family trip. I was funding his comfort while being treated as optional. So I made a decision. I opened my banking app and canceled the automatic transfer to his landlord. Just like that, 2 taps and the payments stopped. Some might consider that harsh. Maybe it is. But consider this.
If you were told your presence was inconvenient while you were financially,
You feel like you finally stood up for yourself. But around day 4 or 5, the guilt begins to settle in. Not because you were wrong, but because you've been conditioned your whole life to feel guilty whenever you prioritize yourself. Does that sound familiar? My best friend, Raylan, was the one who kept me steady. We've been close since college, and she's the type of person who will look you directly in the eye and say, "No, you're not the problem. They are." I needed that perspective. I needed someone outside my family to confirm that my feelings were reasonable. I told Raylan everything, the phone call, canceling the transfer, the trip situation. She simply nodded and said, "Good, you should have done that a year ago." The first week passed quietly. No calls, no messages, which honestly told me everything. When I was useful, my phone never stopped ringing. When I wasn't, there was silence. Then the first of the month arrived, and I waited. 2 days later, Colton called. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, voicemail. Then he sent a message. "Hey, did something happen with the transfer? My landlord says rent wasn't paid." I replied with a single line, "Yeah, I canceled it." After that, my phone lit up non-stop. What happened next, both from Colton and my parents, was something I hadn't expected. If the situation around the trip seemed tense, it escalated quickly before improving. Colton didn't even wait an hour. He took a screenshot of my message and sent it directly to the family group chat, the one I was still part of. He didn't edit anything, just posted it with the caption, "Can someone explain why Jolene is trying to make me homeless?" Homeless. That's the word he used, as if I hadn't been paying his rent for 2 years while he tried to figure things out, as if I had suddenly decided to cause harm without reason. The responses came in immediately. My mom, "Jolene Marie, what is this about? Call me right now." My dad, "This is unacceptable. You made a commitment." My Aunt Sherry, who wasn't directly involved, added, "Family doesn't do this to each other." Not one person asked why I made that decision. No one asked if something had happened or if I was okay. The assumption was that I was at fault. Apparently, the only explanation for me stopping a voluntary payment was that something must be wrong with me. Have you noticed how that works? When you keep giving, no one questions it, but the moment you stop, you become the issue. I didn't reply to the group chat. I muted it and set my phone aside. That evening, Raylan came over with food and a bottle of wine. She said something I won't forget. The fact that they're upset with you instead of reflecting on themselves says everything. She was right. My brother is 28 years old, and when the rent didn't appear in his landlord's account, his first reaction was to go to our parents, not to solve the issue, not to take responsibility, but to escalate it. The next morning, my mom called again. This time, I answered. I felt prepared, rested, clear-headed, and calm. She began with, "Jolene Marie, I raised you better than this." I responded, "Better than what, Mom?" She replied, "Better than this behavior." I asked, "Better than standing up for myself?" Then she said, "Your brother is in a fragile place right now. He's trying to figure out his life." You can't just pull support from him like that. Finding himself at 28 while relying on my money, while I wasn't even invited to the family trip. I said, "Mom, you told me not to come to Destin. You said it would be better if I stayed home. Do you remember that?" There was silence. "You told me my presence would create problems, that Colton needed time to relax." From what exactly? From the situation where I was paying his expenses? More silence. Then she did what she often does. She redirected the conversation. "That's not related to this, Jolene. The trip and the rent are separate issues." But were they really separate? From my perspective, they were clearly connected. I was expected to financially support the family, but not included in it. Would you accept that situation? I told her, "I'm no longer paying Colton's rent. He's an adult. If he needs help, he can ask respectfully, and we can discuss it. But I'm not going to act as the family's financial support while also being excluded." She ended the call. About 20 minutes later, my dad called.
Gene is usually quiet and lets my mom lead conversations, but when he speaks, he often appeals to guilt. He said, "Your mother is very upset. I hope you're satisfied." I replied, "I'm not satisfied, Dad. I haven't been happy for a long time, and no one seemed concerned until the money stopped." He didn't respond to that. He simply said, "You need to fix this," and hung up. Fix it, as if I had caused the issue. For the next week, there was no direct communication, only passive-aggressive messages in the family group chat. My mom posted a quote, "Real family stays together through everything." Colton shared a photo of himself looking upset with the caption, "When the people you trust disappoint you." My Aunt Sherry commented with crying emojis and a heart. Meanwhile, I continued my routine. I went to work, prepared meals, exercised, and even watched a documentary about deep-sea life. Life moved forward, and having that extra $2,100 in my account felt significant. I won't deny that. Raylan continued to check in. She would message, "Still holding up?" And I'd respond, "Yes, still steady." She was a strong source of support during this time, and I genuinely don't know how I would have managed without her. Then the trip happened. They went to Destin without me. Throughout the trip, my mom posted photos online as if everything was perfect. Smiles, coordinated outfits, beach dinners at sunset. Colton appeared in every picture, relaxed and carefree. My cousins Madison and Tyler were there, along with Aunt Sherry and Uncle Dale. Everyone except me. Under one group photo on the beach, my mom wrote, "Nothing matters more than family." I looked at that caption for a while. Then I simply liked the post. No comment. Sometimes the most restrained response is silence. But I want to be clear, I wasn't unaffected. It was difficult seeing them together, knowing I had been specifically asked not to attend. Even when you know your decision was justified, it doesn't always feel good. The trip ended on Sunday. The following Tuesday, exactly 3 weeks after I canceled the transfer, my doorbell rang. It was all three of them, my mom, my dad, and Colton, standing outside my home in Columbus, Ohio. My mom had her arms crossed. My dad stood quietly with his hands in his pockets. Colton stood slightly behind them, as if relying on their support. I opened the door and said, "Can I help you?" My mom walked past me into my home and said, "We need to discuss this situation. It's gone too far." I closed the door and leaned against it. I didn't sit or offer anything. I simply waited. My dad spoke first. "Jolene, your brother is facing eviction. His landlord has given him a 30-day notice. Do you understand how serious that is?" "I do. Does Colton?" Colton finally spoke, and this was the moment that stood out to me. He said, "I thought you cared about me." Not, "Thank you for helping for 2 years." Not, "I'm sorry I didn't repay you." Not even, "I understand your perspective." Just that statement. As if financial support was the measure of care. I looked at him and said, "Colton, I've supported you your entire life. I've contributed more money than many people earn in a year. And in return, I wasn't even included in the family trip, so don't question."
She didn't ask permission. She simply sat down. And for the first time, she didn't look angry or certain, just quiet and smaller than usual. Her hands rested in her lap as she looked at the floor. Colton stood near the window with his arms crossed, avoiding eye contact. My dad shifted his weight, the way he always does when he's uncomfortable. I pulled a chair from the dining table and sat across from my mom. I said, "Mom, I need you to listen to me. Really listen. Not as if I'm being difficult or selfish. Just listen." She didn't look up, but she nodded. I continued, "For 2 years, I've given everything I could to this family. I paid Colton's rent every single month without missing one. I sent money for Dad's truck, for your electric bills, and for other things I don't even remember now. I did it because I care about all of you. But at some point, that care became an expectation. And when I needed to just show up as myself, not as financial support, you told me to stay home." Her chin began to tremble. I added,
That affected me more than you realize. I need you to understand that." The room went completely quiet. Even Sherry on the phone didn't speak. Then Colton did something I didn't expect. He sat down on the floor, lowered his head, and said, "I'm sorry." Not in an exaggerated way, just calmly, as if it had been difficult to say for a long time. He said, "I shouldn't have let things go this far. You were helping me, and I took it for granted. I assumed you were okay because you never complained, but that wasn't fair. None of this was fair to you." I had waited a long time to hear that. My dad sat beside my mom. After a pause, he said, "I owe you an apology too, Jolene. I should have told your mother that what she said about the trip was wrong. I knew it at the time, but I didn't speak up." My mom was quietly crying now, not loudly, but in a way that showed genuine regret. She looked up and said, "I don't know when I started acting like you owed us something, but I did, and I'm ashamed of that." That word, ashamed, stood out. She rarely admits fault, so hearing that made it clear she meant it. Madison sat beside me and placed her hand on my knee. Sherry, still on the phone, said, "Jolene, I'm sorry. I didn't know the full situation. I should have asked more questions." I wiped my face and said, "It's okay. You're here now, and that matters." We spent about 3 hours in that room, talking, being honest, and addressing things we had avoided for years. Colton shared how his failed startup made him feel like he had failed, and instead of dealing with it, he relied on me because it was easier. My mom admitted she had focused so much on protecting Colton that she overlooked me. My dad acknowledged that he avoids conflict and allowed decisions to be made without speaking up. It wasn't perfect or easy. It was uncomfortable at times, but it was real. After they left, I sat alone for a while. The candle Madison brought was still in its bag near the door. I opened it, sea salt and driftwood. I lit it and sat quietly, taking in a moment that felt calm and reflective. In the weeks that followed, things began to change. Colton got a job, an actual stable job, working in operations at a distribution center in Austin. He told me he's putting together a plan to repay me over time. I told him I didn't expect it, but he insisted. He said, "I need to do this for myself." That meant more than the money ever did. My mom now calls every Sunday, not to ask for anything, just to talk. She shares what she's reading, asks about my work, and recently told me she's proud of me. It was the first time she had ever said that, and it meant more than I expected. My dad sent me a message last week. "I love you, kid." He rarely texts, so those 4 words carried a lot of meaning. Madison and I have grown closer as well. We check in on each other regularly. Recently, she said something that stayed with me. "You showed me that it's okay to stop giving when it starts to hurt." I don't think everything is perfect now, and that's okay. Families aren't meant to be perfect, but we're communicating honestly, beyond surface-level conversations. I'm no longer paying Colton's rent. He's managing it himself. And honestly, that may have been the most important decision I made, not because of the money, but because I finally treated him like